We'll start the webinar.
There we go.
Starting the webinar.
Does that mean we're going to stop talking about gur animals?
No, either you can speak about gur animals as much as you like, or gur animals.
I guess it's gur animals. Yeah, gur animals.
Yeah, we have people filing into the gur animal space, and lovely to see. So wow, so lots of people. We got Alberto, Amy, Ashish, Ashwani, Brian, Beth. Listen, for all of those people who are turning up now to enjoy this next hour and a half, why don't you just tell us where you're from? I'm sitting here in London. Where are you all from? Are you in the States? Oh, we got Palo Alto with Mr. Bill Schmarzo, Chicago. I'm going to say London. So just let us know where you are. New Jersey, Virginia, Oklahoma, Zurich, San Francisco again, Paris, India. Welcome.
Beantown, baby. Hey, Lisa.
Beantown, baby.
How you doing?
It's Boston.
Okay, Atlanta, Paris again, on the Strip in Las Vegas. Very nice, Lori. Utah, been there. San Francisco and Binghamton, New York. Hey, Bill, from Lisa. Yeah. Milwaukee. All right, we're just gonna wait for a few more people. Greater Toronto, Canada. Barcelona, Spain. Wonderful. What a great, bunch of people coming in from all over the world. Wonderful. Really, really good to see Calgary, Canada. Lima, Peru. Wow. And good old Marlow. Yes, absolutely. I drove past there the other day, Graham, and thought of you, actually. And I saw the signs for Bisham, which Graham and I had a good conversation. Oh, my goodness. Winston has dialed in from Australia. Very early, I think, what?
That's very early.
Very early.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Bahrain. Sunny Croydon. Hey, there we go. Closer to London. And not many people from London, actually, which is quite interesting.
And they must say something about you, Samir. I'm kind of worries me.
Well, they're distancing themselves from me. Is that what you're trying to say, Bill? Okay.
I'm just connecting the dots.
All right.
Pattern analysis.
Just don't use that data. All right. Great to see you all. I'm half English from London. That counts. Absolutely. It does count. Philadelphia. Wow. We got a good New Jersey again. I was speaking to my next door neighbor. Next door neighbor's from Jersey. She's going back soon to America.
Is that Kate Strackney?
Kate, yes, New Jersey. Yeah, Kate. Right, everybody. Well, great to see you. Yeah, she's just exclaimed, "Hey, Lori." Okay, well, look, thank you all for being here. Fantastic. Stockton-on-Tees. Robert is from Surf. Very, very good to see you, Robert. And I think Lisa's saying, Lori, she loves your hair. So anyway, I had a haircut as well. Everybody like my hair? No. Anyway.
Nice.
Right. Well, look, it's great to see you all. Scott, welcome. And I know that we'll have lots of people still streaming in. So I think we're gonna shoot ahead. And I want to express a warm welcome to everyone here who's joined us today for our first Ask Me Anything event of 2022. And I hope it's been a good start of the year, and I'm looking forward, hopefully one day in the near future. Bill and John don't know this, but I was just thinking about this earlier on. Maybe we could have a live AMA event this year. That would be pretty cool, wouldn't it, eh? So watch this space. Let's see if we can do that. That would be fun. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for your continued support in this series of events. And I think this year we're planning to discuss wider, bigger, and braver topics. So I want to, as always, thank my partners in crime, Bill and John. There they are, and for supporting and bringing their knowledge, insights, arguments, as well as all of the fun and the frolics that we have. Scott Taylor is here. Hey, Scott.
No, we're not live. We're all avatars.
Yeah, exactly. So, and today, a warm welcome to our special guest, Lori Silverman. Welcome, Lori, and thank you for giving us your time today to answer the questions on today's topic. Dun, dun, dun. Data and analytics, why people don't think. So I'm just going to do a few intros, and let me introduce Lori first. Lori Silverman, welcome. As far back as 1988, Lori was guiding teams of statisticians and organizational development practitioners to transform organizations, resulting in all executives and employees using data to optimize decision-making and enhance value. More recently, she's evolved this work into what she calls data literacy 2.0. or 2.0, as you might say it in the States, which includes a step-by-step methodology anyone can use for collaborative data-informed decision-making. And Lori, you call yourself a shift strategist, and she's the founder of Partners for Progress. She's also written 5 best-selling books, including Wake Me Up When the Data is Over and Business Storytelling for Dummies. Wake Me Up. I was thinking of Wham there for a moment. You know, wake me up. She's consulted across 25 industries as a strategist, futurist, and organizational change expert. Keynoted at umpteen conferences worldwide and taught graduate courses in the industrial and organizational psychology master's program at Golden Gate University. So welcome, Lori.
Thank you.
And the other two are quick. John is a global operational executive who excels at building and managing innovative, growth-oriented data and technology organizations across multiple industries. As you know, he's the best-selling author of not 1, but 2 books, Building Analytics Teams, Harnessing Analytics and AI for Business Improvement, and Analytics, How to Win with Intelligence, a keynote speaker, innovator in AI, data and advanced analytics, and he's currently the global head of advanced analytics and AI at CSL Behring. Bill, otherwise known, good to see you, John. Bill, otherwise known as the Schmarzo, and affectionately called the Dean of Big Data, is an influencer and innovator, professor and educator. It's funny when you say professor, because I'm thinking of some Dumbledore type right there, you know? Yeah, exactly. As well as the author of 4 books. So Big Data, Understanding How Data Powers Big Business, Big Data MBA, Driving Business Strategies with Data Science, Economies of Data, Analytics and Digital Transformation, and the Art of Thinking Like a Data Scientist. He's also an executive fellow at University of San Francisco, honorary professor, NUI Galway, and adjunct professor at Menlo College. So welcome, Bill. I don't know if you ever watched University Challenge. I feel like that, I'm, you know, sort of next thing I'm going to be doing is, anyway, it's an English program. Anyway, for those who don't know me, I'm Samir. I'm the CEO of DataZoom, and my specialty is data strategy. I'll be your host today and your facilitator. So listen, we normally get loads of engagement on this, and you know, I would really be great to see lots of engagement from you out there in the audience. And I'll be monitoring and picking up your questions and your thoughts and statements. So please do continue to drive out your questions from when we start to talk about the actual topic. So I always do a little bit of a preamble, and I'll stop talking very soon. But what I'd like to do is, just by way of an introduction, I kick off the discussion. I always do this sort of preamble to get the juices flowing, hopefully. So, you know, the topic, data and analytics, why people don't think. And, you know, I was thinking about this earlier on today, and, you know, every magazine these days, and Bill will probably jump on me after we're done with this, you know, will tell you that the savior of the 21st century is data. You know, make data the center of your earth and it will stop you from making bad decisions and choices. Here's what I hear as well from all of that, and maybe reading between the lines. You know, hire some data scientists and you will soon be freed from making bad choices, as they will magically determine what happens next using all the data that you store in your business, right? So have we become dependent on data and analytics now that we don't think? Here's something that I've found today, which I found fascinating, actually, a blog from Jacqueline Nollis. It's a case study about Coca-Cola and AI. And she prefixes this story about, you know, how they came up with a new flavor. So Coca-Cola used AI to create new soda flavors. Coke used their freestyle flavor machine data to see people were often selecting Sprite with a cherry add-in. So with this knowledge, Coke launched Cherry Sprite as its own soda line in stores, ignoring the fact that we aggregated data and Cherry Sprite was popular, so we launched it. Is the most egregious example of claiming something as AI ever. This is also a great example of how data can hurt decision-making. Consider this, she says, that while Cherry Sprite is the new flavor that has never existed before, the extremely similar flavor of Cherry 7-Up had existed for 30 years. AI combined with data from millions of customers created a flavor that could have been thought up by a Coke executive walking down the grocery store aisle and thinking, huh, we should copy that. Unlike investing millions in data infrastructure, stealing ideas is free, she goes on to say. So if a Coke executive could have made this thirst quencher happen any time over the past 30 years, why didn't Cherry Sprite hit the market until big data was involved? From what I've seen, these situations happen when people implicitly know an idea is good, but they can't get others on board. Over the years, there have probably been hundreds of Coca-Cola executives who thought Cherry Sprite was a good idea, but at no point did they have the critical mass needed to launch the product. Only once someone got freestyle data was that person able to convince the company that the flavor was sound. So that isn't a sign that data is important to make a decision. It's a sign that if only you make decisions with data, then you limit your opportunities. How much more money would Coke have made if they launched Cherry Sprite a decade earlier? How many soda flavors are out there that people would love, but won't ever be launched because they don't exist in a freestyle machine? By limiting yourself to only decisions where you have sufficient data, you dramatically lower the set of acceptable solutions for your company. Often, the most innovation changes that companies could make are the ones where there isn't any possible data beforehand. Interesting. So what's the lesson learned here for me? Don't treat data as the sole source of truth. Otherwise, you'll probably be waiting decades to try another new soda flavor. That's my preamble done about decision-making and data, an interesting case study. So without further ado, I want to think about this particular topic and actually where this topic came from. John, you, myself, and Bill were waxing lyrically about what we were going to talk about. And you started to think about, well, you know, Samir, I want to talk about why people don't think using data and analytics. Give us your 5-minute spiel about that and why that's become something in your world that's really important.
Sure. Thanks for that tee up. I appreciate it, Samir. And Lori, welcome. Hey, Bill, how you doing? Yeah, it's, you know, it's one of the topics that I've been thinking about for years now, is that, you know, your preamble talked about Coke and how they had, you know, had this idea, or many people had this idea, but they didn't have data to support it. It goes the other way too. Lots of people have data, but no ideas to support it. You know, and I've seen, you know, Lori and Bill and you and I talked about this in our conversations earlier, is that I've seen many times, and this is the reason why I talked about this heading, or this label, was that you come to the table with data, and it's, in some cases, it may be irrefutable. It's obvious that the data is telling you something new, but the people don't want to change the way the company operates. They don't want to change the processes. They don't want to believe that the business has changed. They want to continue with tribal knowledge. They don't want to think. They don't want to look at something new. Then in other cases, the data is refutable. It's possible. It's probable. It could be. But again, people don't want to change. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to do the hard mental work of looking at the business or the phenomena as it really is today. And that's, you know, you can put this together in almost every different possible combination. There's got to be millions of combinations of good data, obvious insights. People don't want to change. People want to change, but they don't have the data. It goes on and on and on. And what really happens is that either people are using data to make bad decisions, to, you know, prop themselves up in a way that's not really, you know, supported by the data, or they just want to do it anyway. You know, but my point was that when you bring something forward and it should be obvious and it should drive change, that's painful for people, and they don't want to do that. So they will fall back into the refuge of, well, we've always done it this way.
We've always done it this way.
We're not ready to change, or that's too hard, or I'm not sure, or I'm about to retire, or, you know, whatever their excuses.
And Lori, you've come from a position of decades of this, you know, looking at decision making, looking at how people drive decision making, how they change in their organizations, how they have to improve ways of working and so on. And maybe that's through process, you know, and other attributes, which is what John's saying. We've got to look at the, you know, a lot more than just the data piece. What's your take on this whole idea that people aren't thinking in a way that goes beyond themselves and trying to get into the realms of, you know, getting out of their comfort zone, so to speak?
Well, I want to come back to a phrase that, John, that you used. I actually wrote it down. You said people don't want to do the hard mental work. And my first reaction is, it's not that they don't want to do the hard mental work, it's that our brains are not set up to do the hard mental work. So let's go back to Daniel Kahneman's work, system 1 versus system 2, right? So where do people's brains spend most of their time? System 1 is what? Unconscious, intuitive, fast, gut reflexes, unconscious. And system 2 is conscious, slow, deliberate, effortful. Where do you think they spend most of their time? Right, system 1. The body, the brain is set up to go to system 1, like all the time. All the time. So there is a wonderful Zoe Chance, who's at Harvard, or at Yale, excuse me, just came out with a great book on influence, but she's got some wonderful videos that are on YouTube. And she talks about system 1 as kind of like the alligator brain. And the system 2 is kind of like the court. And she says, the interesting thing is, she said, let's take a very simple situation like going to the grocery store. Most of your buying decisions are very automatic, right? I just pick things off the shelf. I mean, I'm not really thinking about it. She said, imagine if you said to yourself, when I go into the grocery store, for every single buying decision I'm going to make, I'm going to use system 2. System 2 is deliberate. It means that it has to look at the pros and cons. It means it needs to look at all the attributes. How long would you be in the grocery store if you use system 2 to make one grocery shopping trip?
Long time.
A very, 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 very
Too long. Any grocery store trip is too long.
Exactly. So our brains are hardwired to be system 1. And she said, the dilemma is that even when you make a system 2 decision, your brain still uses system 1. And if you make a system 2 decision, it becomes a system 1 habit almost automatically. So right from the get-go, we've got a really serious problem here because our brains are set up for that. Now, you could add to that some really interesting research by Angelica D'Amico. And I have to tell you, Samir, this is really funny. I was in London a couple of years ago, was on a Sunday night, and I'm sitting on the edge of the bed in my hotel room, channel surfing. And I see this futurist on a TV show, and I stopped and I'm like, oh, I want to hear what he has to say. And he quotes her research because I never knew about it before. And this, I think, is really the situation we're all facing. We don't know about this research. So Angelica D'Amico talks about how our working memory tires really fast. So what she's really saying is system 2 tires fast.
Right.
At the most, it can exist for like 20 minutes. At the most. Now, what I thought to myself was, well, is that 20 minutes exhausted as soon as I get out of bed in the morning? Like before I even start my workday? And then how do I get my working memory to recover over the course of a day if I'm in back to back meetings and presentations and PowerPoint slides and everything else, right? So my working memory is continually exhausted. However, to make a good decision, I need 2 things. I need my working memory to be in place, and I need emotions. And that's the other piece of it, which is Antonio Damasio's work, right? So we've learned with him, and he's a physician, that if you take people who are otherwise normal human beings, and the emotional part of their brain for some reason isn't working well, they will never leave the pros and cons. They will never leave that. You say to them, what restaurant should we go to? They'll be talking about all the different aspects of that for the next 20 hours. They'll never be able to make a decision. That we actually, go on, I'm sorry.
No, so what's the counter to that then? How do they get over this hump of, you know, going to this system, so not being defeated by that, as you called it earlier, the alligator brain, or, you know, and then having that working memory, but also having that emotional context. I mean, where, you know, is it the fact that the corporate is tiring us out so that we can't think about it because we are in all of these back-to-back meetings, or how, you know, and again, you know, we have a vast amount of data that's, you know, coming at us from every single angle that we can possibly, you know, fathom, but we can't possibly fathom all of it. So, you know, how do we then switch parts of our brain on or off in order for us to be awake enough, as you say, because the brain is dead, in order to make the right decisions based on some kind of, you know, maybe it's the element of surprise. I have no idea.
Well, I think you asked the most important question, right? So I think back, oh gosh, to my really early work when I used to work in quality management many years ago. We used to do what was called fool-proofing processes, FOOL, okay, where you could not make a wrong decision. Mm-hmm. So the example I give, my very personal decision, is when I was married many years ago, there was a bank of 5 light switches in the basement of our house. And my husband said, don't turn off the light switch that goes to my computer. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him and I said, which one is it? He goes, the second one. I said, the second one from the left or the second one from the right. He went and got some duct tape and he duct taped it in position. And for the 7 years we lived in that house, I never turned it off. I never turned it off. So, I mean, that's a very simple example, right? I think it also has to do with like decision making. You know, people can say, well, we should get people in our organization to learn how to make good decisions with data. And I ask everyone this question, and anybody can answer here. Who has a step-by-step methodology for decision-making in their organization? So people themselves don't have to invent the steps in their brain. And I'm not talking about like 2 steps. I'm talking about a detailed, robust methodology where I can say, here's step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And under step 1, these are the 15 things I need to do. And maybe they don't all apply to my situation, but it's robust enough for me to figure it out. I don't have to remember it in my brain. I don't have to remember.
On that question then, that method, that question, I'm gonna bring in Bill here. I'm gonna say, Bill, what's your thought about what's your thought about the whole decision making, the framework, how we start to bring that in and applying that with the context of brain power, emotions, data, you know, whatever environmental factors there are.
So as Lori was talking about how the brain gets tired when it has to work a lot in system 2, which is spot on. It reminds me of a song from Mickey Gilley called "The Girls All Get Prettier at Closing Time."
I don't know.
Has a lot to do with the fact that by the end of the night, your brain is so tired, they all look good.
Oh my goodness.
So I love the system 1 versus system 2 conversation about, you know, how do we try to override the fact that the brain is wired to make fast, simple decisions. And I'm not going to talk about women at closing time. I see the chat warning me already. Oh, don't go there, Bill. But part of it is maybe consciously or subconsciously, we make a decision about the consequences of our decision being wrong. So when I go to the grocery store, I'm much like Lori, right? I'm going to grab peanut butter. It's going to be either Skippy or Jif, whatever's on sale, and I'm going to grab them, right? Or I'm going to grab, and the decisions I'm making are pretty, low fail-safe decisions, right? Because Skippy and Jif to me interchangeable, right? If I'm going to get a frozen pizza, if it's a Newman's or if it's the California, I don't know. So those are decisions that I'm not afraid to make really spontaneously, and I do not want to waste any of my brain power in the grocery store because I have better places to spend that collateral. But I do think that when we have to make decisions that have high consequences of being wrong, that we need to force ourselves into the decision too. Buying a car or going on vacation, some of them are really quite obvious. But I think there's also decisions that are happening to us day to day. And John, you had a marvelous blog or post this week that talked about the ethics of decisions. And very, very provocative. And I think what happens is that with so much stuff happening around us and so much of observability happening with what we do, that sometimes our system one decisions to just react put us in a position where we have unintended consequences. If by accident you're on Facebook, which I'm not on Facebook anymore, but if you're on Facebook and you happen to click an article that says something on either extreme, right, because a friend of yours is on either extreme, then all of a sudden, because you clicked on that, you're now going to get an avalanche of those same kind of stuff, right? So I do think that we as humans have to make a more conscious effort to understand that the decisions we are making have consequences. If they're small ones, like choosing between Jif and Skippy, that's an easy one. But on things like social media, you got to be really careful. You got to be really thoughtful about what you do, what you say, who you like. By the way, John, I liked your statement, and I'm sure now people are going to look at me with your jaundiced eye and perspective, but I thought it was a spot on point.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And I cut that conversation short. I wanted to go further. I kind of wanted to go in the Lori direction that, the whole thing was about being on Facebook and posting on Facebook and being part of that corrupt environment. And many people jumped in and said, hey, it used to be the thing to do. We didn't know what we were doing. That's a cop-out. There are plenty of places to, look for customers. There's plenty of places to target your messages. It's just lazy that, Facebook was the biggest one. So that's where you went.
It was a marketer's dream. Let's look at it that way. That's what it was. It was a marketer's dream. They got, good payback on it.
Yeah, but it's a Faustian bargain too.
Absolutely. I get that. I completely get that, John. But I think that's what you mean by the lazy aspect.
Right.
Exactly. That's why. Yeah.
We're saying exactly the same thing. Yeah. In Lori, correct. I've never really heard anybody, go that deeply into what you were talking about, where system 2 wears out in 20 minutes. And I do believe that. I do see a couple startups out there. I'm not going to plug anybody, but what they're working on is decision frameworks. And if you think about it, given what you've just said, Lori, what they are building is crutches for the system 2 mind. So if the system 2 mind is worn out and you've been able to document, let's say, a brand extension decision or a decision to choose target markets, people in Procter & Gamble and Gillette and all these other CPG companies know they have to make these decisions, but they get tired and they get fatigued and they get lazy and they cut corners. So if we can build systems that are not just pulling data out of databases and doing AI and different kinds of statistical operations on data, and actually build the decision flows so they enforce the rigor and the mathematics and the process flow and the recursion where we can make better decisions, I think we're going to be really much, much better off in how we make decisions personally and how we make decisions in a corporate environment.
May I ping off of that?
Yeah, carry on, Lori. Yeah, absolutely. And then once you're done, I'm going to bring in some questions from the audience that have been sent in. So carry on, Lori.
Okay, I think there's a both and. So I think that's the technology way of doing it, but there is a human way to do it. The human way to do it is the following. When we use or talk about data or information, I don't care which word you want to use, because I'm going to use them interchangeably here. We know through MRI studies that only 2 parts of the brain light up. And those are the parts of the brain in the prefrontal cortex where this working memory is that tires out. But there is one form of narrative that attaches to more than 7 parts of the brain through MRI studies, one form of narrative. And that is a well-constructed narrative story. And the dilemma we face today, and I'm going to get on a soapbox here for a little bit. So give me like 50 minutes.
Go for it, Lori.
The field of data storytelling is going the wrong direction. It is not about data visualization. That is still data. And the brain is going to tire out. I am talking about narrative story. And I'm not talking about a case study, an example, a description, a vignette, a scenario. I mean, there's lots of different types of narrative. I'm talking about what is a well-constructed narrative story, and how can I bring story approaches and techniques into the decision-making process at every single step along the way, so that I can allow the brain to use these other areas. Because when working memory tires, the sad part is information literally goes in one ear and out the other. There is no ability for it to be sticky. However, we have tons of research in the story arena about the stickiness of story. And so I think that what we have to bring in is this human skill that, you know, and I talk to leaders of technology companies, and I've been talking to them for 10 years about this. You know, they will say to me, but my technology can't create a well-constructed narrative story. And I'm like, that's correct. We have to teach people how to do that.
Yeah. And there's a response. Beth has just said synthesizing, not summarizing the information. And Winston just said narrative storytelling. He uses it all the time, explaining solutions from an IT architecture perspective. So I think people are doing it, but it's a very, very, you know, I think storytelling for us as human beings, I think, is becoming a lost art.
Yes.
You know?
Well, and you know, I've been working in this field now for almost 20 years. But let me give you a different technique. When people are trying to understand context before you ever get into decisioning, you know, everyone talks about using questions. I don't use questions. I use story prompts. And I prompt stories out of leaders. Because if I can prompt the stories out of them, I can understand their mental model far better than a question will ever get at. And the stickiness of my story prompts the stickiness of remembering the story in their brain. So now they're going to have all these other connections, and they're going to stay with me far longer than using any other technique. So that's why I'm saying it's not just the, to your point, Samir, this lost art, which yes, it's, I'd like to think as a pioneer in the field that we've made progress. I don't think we've made progress.
Well, so here's the thing. The reason I'm saying that is, you know, look, we've had Kent who's just said, coming from sales, it's interesting to see the data world realizing the power of story, you know, but yet when I go into a client's, you know, into a client session where they're talking about insight, I just see numbers. I don't see story. You know, and how does it apply in the real world and the context? You see, and I think that's the bit which is often not embedded into that process. So is it the fact that the leaders in that corporate only look at things a particular way, or have they become lazy to look at things in a particular way? You know, so, or is it the person delivering the information doesn't understand how to do so because they're only worried about, have I made that number go up or down? So, you know, there's a lot of things that I see which are difficult for people to get over. And so here's the thing, I'm going to inject a question in because I think it's about time that I did. People have sent in questions, so I felt really bad for not starting. So I've got a question from Steve Remington. So intuition is often written off as a bad or even dangerous thing in organizational decision-making, with a data-driven / informed approach being better. What role should intuition play in organizational decision-making? Now, we've talked about some of it, but I'd throw that out to you guys to start that conversation about intuition. Why is it poo-pooed by many people and saying, no, we just must have strict data? What's the reason why it's?
I will jump in as a very intuitive person. I tend to use my intuition a great deal in making decisions and looking forward. And I've talked to a number of people in organizations about why they don't act on their intuition or their gut or whatever. And they will say that, you know, if I don't have anything to back it up other than my experience and my expertise, then I'm going to get shot down in a meeting, or I'm going to be ridiculed, or people will make fun of me. And the bottom line is, you know, your intuition comes from your experience and your expertise. And we hire people for our experience and expertise, and our intuition is the expression of that. So the fact that people don't want to use their intuition is saying then we should hire people who have no experience or expertise. It's nonsensical.
Yeah. Bill, you wanted to, you got,
Yeah,
yeah,
if I
go
could-
for it.
I want to build on what John said, because
Yeah.
intuition is the heart of feature engineering. If we think about data science process, and I know we're trying to not go down the data route, but
Don't worry, just take the narrative. Do it.
yeah,
do it, that's
but
fine.
you know, intuition is, you know, it's getting down and talking to the front lines of the operations to understand, you know, how, you know, I'm a big fan of focusing on how organizations, people make decisions. A lot of decisions today are made on intuition, but those intuitions come from experience. The theme park operator says, yeah, when that light blinks red 3 times in the next 5 minutes and I hear this vibration, I know in the next 10 minutes that compressor is going to go out. It's like, really? Wow. You know, that's, you know, they develop intuition, and we leverage intuition when we do our feature engineering development process, which drives all of our AI and ML models. So intuition is something we shouldn't, you know, peanut butter over.
How do you engage that with the individual though? How do you engage that and embed it? That's the thing about, you know, if you're looking at an AI or an ML model, you know, there's strict rules behind that, I'm assuming, and then suddenly you're going to embed a narrative of intuition.
Well, but you take what their observations, what they have, and you try to prove them. You try to, you know, we're going to use data science. Say, well, does that really happen? And then decompose that to understand it, so we can model it, so we can scale it. So, intuition to me is where the power happens, which is why I think at the heart that, you know, AI is going to make humans more human. It's going to make humans more important in our ability to observe things that's going on, to build that tribal knowledge, and to collaborate with the data and the data scientists to try to figure out how do you codify and scale that.
Okay, well, I'll bring Lori in. Oh, sorry. Sorry, John, I'll just bring Lori in.
I love what you're all saying. Let me give you an example of the use of intuition that to me was one of the most striking. It's different. It's outside the realm of what we're talking about. I was talking to a gentleman one day who had helped to build a stadium for a college team, I believe, in Seattle. And right before they were finishing this particular stadium, he was the on-site construction leader. He had an intuitive sensation, and he can't tell you where it came from. And he said to all his foremen, get every guy off the job right now. Every single person off the job right now. Hundreds of people, hundreds and hundreds of people off the job immediately, off the structure. And the guy's like, you're crazy. It's not break time. He said, I don't care. I want them off the structure. So he did, got them all down. 2 minutes later, the structure collapsed.
Oh my goodness.
And he cannot tell you how he knew that. I think our dilemma is, in whatever technology systems we design, especially like the ones that John was talking about earlier, we have got to have a way for intuition to integrate into the decision process. And up front, when I'm talking with someone again about setting context, I talk with leaders and others about what's your intuitive sense of what the right answer is.
So,
because you can't ignore this. And
yep.
But I want to come back to something you said, Samir, to just tie this together. If a leader is dead set that their intuitive sense is correct and that no matter what you do is not going to change that, I say, then don't waste our time. Let's just implement what you think. And if you're willing to risk it being wrong, we'll save time.
So that word you just used there, risk, is it because people really don't want to take that leap, take that risk, and they will be seen as the person who made the bad decision, the wrong decision, and therefore there is a reluctance or a fear in order to put themselves out there, and therefore you know, everybody will come to the table, or people might come to the table and say, I will do this because the data is telling me to do that, you know. And is that the reason why we're now in this kind of vicious circle of everybody just thinks if I use data and I use that to make a credible decision, it can never bite me, it can never come back to me? Yeah, go on, John. Yeah.
Right, John.
Well, you know, I want to tie together a couple things, you know, that Lori said, that Bill said, that Amy said in the chat. You know, intuition is the expression of experience and expertise. And what Bill was talking about is feature engineering. So yes, we do exploratory data analysis, we use descriptive statistics, we use all that kind of stuff. But the best feature engineering people I've ever worked with, data scientists, use their intuition. And that's an expression of their expertise and experience. What Amy said is you're basically using data science to codify intuition into feature engineering, which then drives the value of the models. So if you get right down to it, the best models have an intuitive component to it. No one talks about it, but it's true.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Can I
go on.
add on that? So Samir, you asked a question about, people are afraid to make decisions because they're afraid of the punishment.
Mhm.
And a lot of this conversation always gets back to cultural.
Yes,
Right?
of
You
course.
have a culture.
Yeah.
You have a culture where you punish or you learn from bad decisions.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
we all make bad decisions.
Of course.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's just in the area of data science. I mean, when we're trying to explore different variables we want to test, we're going to try lots of things that don't work. If we punish the data scientists every time they build a model, it didn't work, we wouldn't have any data scientists. And so,
but I think it works along that value chain. I don't think it just works with the data scientist. It works with the output the data scientist might be giving to a business person. So there's that cross collaboration piece that then they need to test with each other. Do they bring in the different perspectives? How do they bring in the external world? How do they try?
And you have a feedback loop that's continuously learning and adapting. I mean, you can't learn if you don't fail.
Exactly.
Right? And if you punish failure, then you can't learn.
But I think it goes back to John, what John said at the beginning. It's the way we've always done something. That is the default for most people. So maybe it's the small percentage of people who absolutely bring all of those factors into the conversation and are fearless enough to do that and have that kind of, the narrative played out in such a way that they can look at all those different possibilities in the decision making. But I want to bring in another question, because I think this is also a really good question, thinking about the output from technology. So it's something that Lori said earlier, and Phil Fry sent me this question. Do visualizations help with the decision making, or do they short circuit the thinking process, or process if you're in England? Go on, Lori, go for it. Where do you start?
Well, first of all, data visualizations to me are just observations of the data. They don't even get insight. They don't get insight. And we're not here to look at observations of the data. What we should be talking with people about is what sorts of insights are we having as a result based on what our inquiry was up front, the questions that we set for ourselves or whatever that we need to answer, the decisions that we need to take action on. That's my first piece to all of this. Repeat your question again, because I'm like, I went off on my tangent. The visualizations.
Do visualizations help with decision making, or do they short circuit the thinking process?
I want people to use narrative story. Leave the visualizations. See, here's the dilemma. Can I just quote? I want to do something first. Can I take a segue?
Yeah, sure.
When I was in college, I would sell my meal tickets. And so I would have no money at the end of the semester for food. I would sell them for cash. And so I would sign up for psychology experiments. And I want us, four of us, to imagine we're in this psychology experiment together, okay, with Deborah Small. And the experiment isn't important, but what she gives us afterwards is Samir and the rest of you, you're all going to get an envelope with 5 $1 bills in it. And there's going to be a letter inside of your envelope. And Samir, for you, there's a letter about a little girl in an underdeveloped country who has no food, she has no education, she has no clothing, she has no place to live. And it's a well-constructed story. Would you please donate? And for you, John, you're going to get the 5 $1 bills, US $1 bills. And your letter's really different though. It's here's all the statistics around the Save the Children Foundation and all the wonderful things they've been able to do for children, millions of children around the world. And will you please donate? And Bill, you get a very different letter. You get a letter that's a combination letter. You get the story and you get John's letter all combined into one. And you've got your 5 $1 bills. And you're asked to donate. So I have 2 questions. First question is, who donated the most money?
We're college students. Nobody donated anything.
Certainly wasn't me.
That's beer money.
Did donate, John.
I would say the one that
it was Bill.
I would say the one that came to Bill, because you had both data and the story in there.
Yeah.
You could hit either part of the brain that way.
That's what I'm thinking. No.
So group number 1 gave this much money. Group number 2 gave this much money, statistically significantly different. Group number 3, just watch my hands, gave this much money.
Didn't change.
It didn't change.
Oh,
The
interesting.
data visualizations, the data dampens the story. It
That's
negates it 1,000%. With this research from 2006 has been repeated over and over and over again because of fundraising, folks love it. But we in business don't want to embrace it. We have got to leave these visualizations off to the side. Now,
Hey,
it doesn't
Lori.
mean that numbers don't matter.
Right.
It's,
Lori,
it's
there was a question in the chat earlier, and I also have the same question. I don't know what a story prompt is. Can you give us an example?
Tell me about a time in your life that you would say you made the worst decision ever.
Coming on this show. Oh, well, that was
Today's show in particular, right? Yeah. So a story prompt causes our brain to go, when well constructed again, because you can't use a story prompt like, tell me about your day. I know if I have a kid coming home from school and I say, hey, tell me about your day, they'll look at me cross-eyed and like, go do something else, right? But if I say, tell me about the highlight of your day, I might get a response. But I have to ask for one specific answer, one, not like a plethora of things. And it's the phrase, tell me about. And you have to have the word about in there. That's just one type of story prompt. Because if you say, tell me what you did today, you're just rephrasing a question. So that's what a story prompt would be.
So Matt
Lori.
is saying the story prompts sound like what we used in behavioral interviewing.
Yes, that's correct.
Neurocognitive behavioral stuff.
Yeah, that's why they were taught to HR professionals.
So I'm gonna just float that question with the other two, because I'd really like to understand. I mean, I'm not a fan of data visualizations, to be fair. I've seen them done so badly over the years, and people don't use them anymore. People look at them for about a couple of seconds and just think, oh, well, I'm just going to go back to my day as it was. So, you know, have we become, you know, have these data visualizations short-circuited the way that we think? John or Bill, what's your view on that?
Well, data visualization has always been a crutch. You know, it's been a shortcut way to try to get people to engage with the data when they don't want to engage with the data. So it's always going to be, you know, half baked or half useful or whatever it is. You know, I'm going to step back just for a second. I grew up in a town of 200 people in Michigan. My father owned an auto repair shop. To the north was a gas station. To the west was another auto repair shop. And I would spend my days going between those three places, listening to these crotchety old men tell stories. And I thought it was just wasting my time, you know, listening to them telling fish stories and how they fixed a car and how this truck was stuck and, you know, blah, 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 and how the neighbor was a deadbeat. But that taught me how to tell interesting stories. It taught me how to bring people in, keep them interested, and talk about things that people care about. You know, storytelling is an art. Yes. And I never really thought about it. You know, I've been telling stories my whole life. Ever since I was 5 years old, I'd sit and listen to these guys tell stories. You know, I just didn't realize that I was being trained to be a great storyteller. So, you know, it's something that, you know, we get people talking and training and corporate training and all this kind of stuff about storytelling. It really, Lori, you're absolutely right. Most of the time what they're doing is showing visualizations. Yes. Trying to string it together. Yeah. You know, we had a instance at work where we brought in narrative sciences tool to read tabular data and write language. It writes narrative, you know, comments. This went up, that went down. And what we've done is we've used that as a forcing mechanism to stop people from telling us what happened. Now you have to tell us why and how it happened. So we're forcing storytelling to go up the line of value. So I think that's just the way it has to be. People have to be trained on what a good story is, and most of them have not been.
Well, and trained on how to construct one. It is an art and a science. When we wrote Business Storytelling for Dummies, that was our #1 objective, was to teach people how to construct a story, a well I want to say informed ones, so to speak, because stories are not about the elements of story. Stories about relaying an experience. And a lot of people don't talk about that with business storytelling. My colleague does. And so it's a relaying of an experience so that people can easily digest, the brain can easily digest what it's hearing, understand it, and take action.
And I think that's the bit that doesn't necessarily happen at the end, that take action bit. I think that's the bit that doesn't happen. It often gets lost or disconnected from the actual narrative. Bill, I don't know if you got up to say something. I can see you.
I'm stretching, I guess, but I was thinking about, John's telling his storytelling story. When I was a kid and I used to tell stories, I used to get spanked. So my storytelling was like
what kind of stories did you tell, Bill?
Like the bear broke into the basement, and that's who bent that's the golf club, right? It was that bear, right? It wasn't me.
Yes, well, I think we all tell those kind of, but I didn't have my stories.
But I agree in the whole data visualization thing. Sorry, I get stiff when I sit too long. Is that it's become a crutch. Data visualizations can support the storytelling. They are not the storytelling, and so it has a role. You can create a story using visualizations. We all go to movies. That's nothing but visualizations, telling stories. I love, I'm a big fan of design thinking, because what I like about design thinking, because it really focuses in trying to understand intent, what people are trying to do, what are they trying to accomplish. And I think that the best way to help people understand how they can achieve what they want to achieve is through storytelling that's supported by data and analytics. It's, I'm very biased in that, but I think you're right that the compelling, getting people to act. If you can construct a great story, they can do it. And there's no reason, by the way, why data can't be part of that storytelling process. In fact, I would argue that.
Yeah, I think we found the answer though, Bill, because the answer is that we all have to hire the world-class storytellers, the Irish. That's what everybody's talking about on the chat. So I think we're going to have to, apparently they are the world-class storytellers. So we're missing a trick here.
Yeah, can I add to what both of you have said, because you're going in a particular direction that I absolutely adore. I think it's important to remember that there's a difference between sense making and meaning making. Showing a data visualization is all about sense making. You're wanting to keep people in system 2 in their brain. They don't want to be there. They don't want to be there. They want to be in system 1. Storytelling is about making meaning in the unconscious part of the brain. So Yuri Hassan did some research on this. He did MRIs of like people like me who tell stories in front of a stage to large groups of people. And he looked at the MRIs of the people in the audience, and he looked at the MRIs of the storyteller. The MRIs of the people in the audience showed that more than 7 parts of their brain lit up, and the identical 7 parts of their brain lit up. Identical. When you looked at the teller, the exact same 7 parts of their brain lit up. Now, what was different between the teller and the people who were listening is that the people who are listening had another piece of their brain light up, which was anticipatory, like what's coming next. The amount of time it took for this alignment to happen, which is what we want in organizations, right? 2 seconds. 1, 2. That's it. With a story, that's it. And so we keep thinking, oh, if we do our data visualizations better, use more color, use more this, use more that. We're going to stay in sense making. We're going to stay in system 2. We can go to system 1. I love that you are so skilled in this.
So go on, John.
Yeah, we've been banging on data visualizations, and I'm right there with you. But the one thing that I have got my data scientists to do finally is that any visualizations that we show need to be animated, because most of the things that we're showing have a time component. So we run them like little movies. And what that does is it gives people the ability to look at it and say, oh, that's the dynamic. It's not a pie chart. It's not a circle chart. It's not a histogram. It's not a line. It's an actual dynamic illustration of what's happening, the phenomena that we're understanding and trying to trying to change over time. So, like Lori said, these things run for 2 to 5 seconds, and they're hugely powerful. It's better than putting up a 10 slide deck. In just 6 or 7 seconds, people like, that's really happening.
People get it though very quickly, right?
Yeah.
So I've got the question up from here in the feed from Valerie Logan. So how do we help people decipher misinformed stories? Sometimes very skilled storytellers can be full of BS, and this is running rampant now. BS.
Well, that's our job, isn't it, to propagate the BS?
Yeah,
that's so true. That is.
Lori, do you want to take that?
Well, again, if you're using a decision-making methodology that starts with context and what it is you're trying to look at, and this is for anyone, because I teach people in all levels of an organization. I don't work just like in data analytics groups. And in this process, you're looking for insight, right? And because that's what I'm trying to go from observation to insight. And we talk about 3 different types of insights. Those insights have to be meaningful related to this. This is where I tell the story. So I don't know where the BS story comes in unless you're ignoring everything in the middle, which is all the data and the intuition pieces being combined together. So that's what I'm looking at is, are you using the methodology? But the problem is most organizations, I'd say 99.97 don't have methodologies for this. So that's my take as someone who's coming at it from a human perspective.
I think you're right. And in the last week or so, what's been very enlightening for me is seeing a number of people engaging on a few posts that I've put out on LinkedIn around decision making, and absolutely having a framework in place. And most people have come back saying, we don't have a framework. We don't work within that context. And therefore, I like the idea that John said earlier of having something that, you can map it all the way through. Because I think that nowadays people are flooded with so much that they are lost in this mire of data, and if you bring them to areas where they can start to evolve that thinking and make that decision, I think that's going to drive out better responses from people rather than having to look around and try and decipher all of this stuff in front of them, which is what data visualizations do, right? They have to try and decipher it then. So I think going back to that and then adding, as you said, the intuition layer and, maybe design thinking on top, it becomes a much bigger proposition. But are companies willing to do that? Because there is a question from Robert Vane: can we avoid the consequences of the way that we are taught and trained by the same industry that exists mostly to sell technologies and technologists?
Can I deal with something else first that I see here? Okay. The decision-making methodology I'm talking about is not the scientific method, because the scientific method is only critical thinking skills. The decision-making method that I'm talking about includes strategic thinking. It includes intuition. It includes insight and what insight means. And the scientific method, which I know, and all of us on this screen know, is not it. And it includes, at least the methodology that we've developed, includes all the brain research that we're talking about here. So I think that we have to step away and say it's not, that the scientific method is a wonderful starting point, but it's not where we are today because of all the lovely things that have been shared here.
Yeah.
Show me a scientific method that includes intuition.
Can I go back
to the
beginning of our conversation?
Yep.
There's no doubt storytelling is really powerful. It can be used for good. We've seen it used for bad too. We've seen bad people tell stories, make up their own data, make up their own facts, and get people to take actions that are not in anyone's best interest. And so I think part of this conversation needs to get back to the listener has to have accountability for critical thinking, that you hear a story and you need to be able to, you're still accountable as the listener to what the story is being told, right? So we need to make certain that that critical thinking is being applied, that we're, maybe skeptical, that we check the sources before we take action. Now, storytelling can be extremely powerful, but the onus of the action that people take is not you can't blame the storyteller. You have to look at yourself in a mirror and say, it's your accountability. It's your responsibility to thoroughly think through what's being told, to say, well, do I believe that? And do I think it's even true?
Yeah, I agree. There's lots of times where people, see things and they jump into it, and they, we have conversations, and I say, do you really think that's true? We just did some work in our day jobs where we were looking at, norms and ranges and things like that. And there's a subpopulation of the employees that are doing something that's just not right. I won't go any further than that. But the norm, for that data is 2.3, and all their entries are 7 to 11. Can't be true.
Right.
So back to a question that we had earlier, and perhaps this is something that we've covered or not, but I just want to make sure that I get, so actually Robert brings in a second question, which, I'm going to leave this to you guys to, or maybe Robert to explain a little bit more, but should semiotics be the first theory to understand in this case? Is pragmatic competence the goal? I'm kind of, I'm not with it on those two things, but maybe I can get some education here.
I don't even know the definition of semiotics.
No, nor do I.
I don't either.
No. I think we'll sorry.
Stump the panel.
Sorry,
yeah.
you've stumped. Yeah, you've stumped the panel today. So
you win the prize. You win the LeBron James.
Is that the hot cars?
Space Jam van.
Maybe it's linked back to something else. But Neil Burge sent in a question, which is, why do data and analytics professionals rush to solve the first interesting technical problem they hear, rather than drilling into the underlying business problem the organization is really trying to solve? That's
well, let me jump on that.
Yeah, go for it.
That is generally done by data science teams that are not run by good data science leaders. Mm-hmm. What you have there is people that say, hey, I've got some data, it might be accurate, I can run these kind of techniques on it and come back with an answer. Well, that's an answer to the technical measurement question. Mm-hmm. That's not an answer to the business objective. That's not, a recommendation put into a business context. That's a poor approach by the data science team. And if they're doing that, then they're not really delivering value to the organization.
Yeah. What about any other thoughts on that? Or Bill, Lori?
I'll plus one that. That's the right guy.
Okay.
I mean, what we've done, in my team is that, yes, we do that. Yeah, we see data, we rush to analyze it and come back with answers, to that question. Then, we've done that plenty where we've gone to people and said, here's the number you want, it's 2. Mm-hmm. But what we've then found out is that those people then go, 2, I don't know what the hell to do with 2.
Yeah.
So, we go back and we do more work. And then we come back and we make recommendations. Mm-hmm. Hey, if you want to maximize profitability, you should go in this direction.
Do X.
Yeah. You want to maximize operational efficiency, it's this way. Yep. If you want to just stem the flow of loss, this is it. Mm-hmm. So our jobs as data scientists, and I'll yield to Bill in a second, is to not only do the analytics, but give them recommendations in the context of the business that they're operating in.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Go for it, Bill.
In the context of the business, John, perfect. That's the key thing, right? So our data science teams, what we do is we spend a lot of time using design thinking techniques to collaborate with our users, understand the problem they're trying to solve, identify the KPIs and metrics against which they're going to measure success, bring in a diverse set of stakeholders. There's a huge process we go through before we ever put science to the data, right? If you don't do all that pre-work, and one of the biggest problems I run into in many organizations is they think too narrowly about the KPIs or metrics against what they're going to measure, right? They only have a couple, 2 or 3. It's like, no, you as a leader need to broaden and say, well, we need to think about things like, we're going to try to improve customer retention. Yeah, we're going to try to reduce inventory costs. We're going to try to reduce unplanned operational downtime. But what are we doing for employee satisfaction? What are we doing for environmental issues? What are we doing for society issues? I mean, you've got to broaden the conversation. Mm-hmm. And when you broaden the conversation, you start identifying these KPIs, some of which actually conflict with each other. When you have conflict is when you have innovation, Now you're trying to resolve the problem. We're trying to resolve, improving healthcare in the US while improving the economy. Now, why is that an either or conversation? That should be an and conversation.
I had the blessing many years ago of being at the first Balanced Scorecard conference with a client. And I have a couple of reactions to all of this when it comes to these KPIs. First of all, at an organizational level, we're only talking about outcome measures. And outcome measures don't change a business. They don't change a business. But the thing that really bothers me today with people who are creating dashboards is none of it seems to be related to business processes. The way that I was taught to create KPIs was I mapped business processes first. And then I said, what outcome measures does this process have that relate to what the organization's outcome measures are? And then what in-process measures do we need as a team to track? Because they will give us an indication if something's wrong before it gets to the outcome. And the dashboards were around those in-process measures for our team. And people sit down today and all they're putting up are what they think these KPIs should be, with no understanding of how they relate back to the business of the business. And that's what I think we're talking about here is, where are they coming from? They have to be attached to something, because if I have to change something, I have to know what it is that's connected back to change. So at least to separate these fields out from each other.
I think that's a common issue in most visualizations, most strategies I see, most data initiatives that are not pinned back to that business focus or business outcome.
One of the first things we ask when we're talking to an executive, a manager, a subject matter expert is this a project? Do you just need a number? Or is this a program where you want to change the business over time and continuously? And we approach them very differently. If it's just a number, okay, we'll crank it and
we'll give you a number. Yeah.
But if we're going to actually do something that's going to change the business, then we're going to have to do all the things that Lori just talked about and more.
But I think it's essentially, if somebody comes and asks that particular, has that request, it's the why factor then. Why do you need that? What are you going to do with it? How is that going to change the way that you're going to think? Is that going to make you deliver something differently? Is that going to delight our customers? Is it going to change the product, the nature of the product that we sell? And I think even the first question, I just want a number, still, goes into the play of, well, why do I need it? So I think that, even if you do ask those two separate angles, I think they kind of come together at some point, because then you're giving somebody a bunch of numbers that you have no idea when you walk away what they're going to do. And is that effective or not?
Here's part of the challenge with the KPIs conversation, which I love the conversation with customers. I just had one yesterday with a customer and I got done. And the problem is I believe that the KPIs an organization uses to measure their effectiveness says more about their culture than any bullshit mission statement. Right? John Smale at Procter & Gamble used to always say, when he was CEO there, he would say, you are what you measure and you measure what you reward, which is his way of saying, as a company, you are how you pay people to act. And I think that's, part of the problem. And I love, Lori, your point about these business processes. We can pave the cow path. We can optimize the cow path by taking what we do today and using the data we have today to optimize that. But we need to bring in that human factor if we really want to reinvent, if we want to leverage conflict to reinvent the cow path. And again, that conversation starts by taking these KPIs and starting to really make sure we understand what it is we're trying to accomplish as an organization. If you just want to make money, if you're going to optimize and clicks, likes, and share, then you're going to be like Facebook. You're going to have AI confirmation bias, and you're going to have, a country at each other's throats. But if you think more broadly about what we're trying to do, empowering people and fairness and et cetera, it will change dramatically the KPIs around what you're going to measure and how you're going to pay people.
So here's a question from Gopal Sharma, not a relative of mine. So I'm not stepping him up the priority list. But seeing as we've just been through a period of intensity in terms of this pandemic, what needs to change? How does the narrative on data need to change in the post-COVID era? Is there a change that needs to be
Does
made?
it need to change?
No, I'm just asking. That's the question. Does it need to change? Do we need to do things differently? Is there, perhaps the way that we saw stuff before COVID and after COVID changes, perhaps there is a change in that mentality. Go on, Bill.
I think one of the things we can do is we got to stop making decisions on overly generalized policies based on averages. When you make decisions based on averages, at best you get average results. And we need to think more granularly at the individual level of how we help people, right? We use very generalized decisions about who should qualify for vaccination. You know, God help you if you were 2 weeks away from being 65 years old, you couldn't get vaccinated, right? Because you didn't fall into that criteria, right? There was no leniency. And so we tend to, I think there's an opportunity for us to make more granular, better decisions based on the data we have that can drive really dramatic impacts in how we do things. But we also have to change how people look at data and how we use data and how, I mean, I'm a big believer in this idea that you need to teach critical thinking to everybody, so that when you see something on Facebook, when you see something on social media, when you see something coming across on the blog, that you stop and say, well, you know, what's the source of that? Do I believe them as people? Do I believe in? And again, it gets back to John's point at the very front, is that you can't shirk responsibility for and accountability for acting on what you hear.
Yeah, John, you put your finger up there.
Yeah, exactly. There's, you know, I don't want to be flip about Gopal's question. It is a serious question. And, you know, one of the underlying premises and principles of this dialogue is that, you know, all of us have been at this for decades. And, you know, when Bill and I, you know, started back in Metaphor so many years ago, and he and I thought, hey, you know, we've got this lick that's done in 1985 and there will be no more improvements to be made. It's all done. And here we are 30 years later, 35 years later. You know, the data and analytics and processes and decision science will never end. I have people ask me all the time when I'm talking about my books, when is this going to be done? The answer is never. This is an evergreen field, and it will change, and it does need to change. I mean, things that Lori's talking about, I'm grateful you're here, Lori. You know, you brought a really fresh and interesting perspective to this dialogue. That, you know, there's so much more we can do in what Lori's talking about. You know, this is a lifelong journey, and it will go beyond our lives as well. So does it need to change? Yes. Will it change? Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for your kind words, John. I want to add that organizational perspective. And Samir, you and I have talked briefly about this, and I think we have a little bit of perspectives. Work from home. I've worked from home since 1988. I don't know how much true innovation we can have if people continue to work from home. I don't think we can. Because there's something about this human element where people are physically co-located, and it's what I'm talking about. You know, it's the ability to just create, to co-create in the moment with each other, and to have more thoughtful dialogues, and to walk outside the room and talk to someone, and to have these side conversations and everything else. And we're losing way too much. And so to me, it is impacting companies' abilities, not only to make decisions, but to take their organizations forward. And my fear is that while we're seeing innovations come out today, those innovations have been in the works for years, pre-COVID. Oh, they're doing construction in my building. You can probably hear it.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
So
you can barely hear it.
We've had some disagreement on the thread with Daryl saying that's such legacy thinking. So carry on that vein. But it's interesting. We've got some, you know, opposites here in the mix.
Yes, I know that it's considered to be legacy thinking, but it has to do with my appreciation and the work that I've done for many decades, with the difference between what does it mean to have people present collectively together versus separate, and then what do hybrid models look like? Because things like organizational change, I'm not talking about project change, but organizational change management hasn't evolved enough to be able to say, how do we get alignment when people are not co-located. Like we're just missing certain elements of that. And I'll tell you, you can be as controversial as you want about this. I'm not changing my stance, and it's not because I'm old, and it's not because it's because I've had decades of seeing the difference as someone who not only has worked from home, as I said, for many, many years, but I got to work with one of the first companies who has always
hang on, Bill.
been a work from home company. And so we've had to develop unbelievably new things with them that I know companies still aren't using today.
Bill, go ahead. I mean, we've got some dissonance on the.
I love that this is, and Lori, I am 100% in your camp on this. And I think from my experience, innovation happens when there's conflict, when people are bringing different perspectives and passionate about those perspectives together. And for me, it's easy to resolve conflict when we're sitting around a whiteboard or a flip chart or something, and we can look each other in the eyes, and we can understand, and we can have a conversation about what's your rationale behind that, and you can tease out the components of their position, and you can tease out your components, and we can take these assets and we can start to munge them together to create something bigger. Now, there's probably, maybe the younger generation can do this through Zoom. I don't got time for green bananas, folks. No time for green bananas. And so for me, I'm much better when I can have people in a room who have disagreements, but I can lock the door. And by the way, I'm a big guy, so I can lock the door and stand in front of the door and say, "You're not leaving until we had a chance to really bottom this thing out." And that's where the innovation happens, when you have these different perspectives and people who don't think they're on the same side of the aisle, when they realize, oh my gosh, here is the common ground, and I can take this idea, and this idea is not an and or, it's not an or conversation, it's an and conversation.
Yep.
It's interesting, and I can, on many things, I can argue both sides of the equation.
Yes.
But it's often that we are not having these passionate, idea driven exchanges when we're in the office. We're having boring, droll, deadly, paint drying meetings that suck the soul out of everybody that's in it. So, yes, I'm good to get in the office. I'm good to be in the room with Bill all the time, anytime. Sitting around talking about, these things that just want to make me pull my fingernails off, I'd prefer not.
John, is that a system zero type of thing? There's system one, system two, and there's system zero, which is meetings.
That's a political way of John saying, actually, I think it could be done the other way as well. Because I mean, this is the conversation I had with Lori. I mean, it was simple that, yes, while I feel that, people are coming back into the offices, but I go with some of John's notions around people don't actually, they sometimes limit themselves in conversation. I have had a virtual team for the last 9 years. Okay, and we've been a virtual team because it's been easier. We don't necessarily want to have a big corporate building or whatever. And actually, we've engaged each other on various different digital platforms and have been able to innovate in a way that, even if we came together every day, I don't think that would happen. I think having the sort of the distance, the understanding about our personalities, our natures, has been the way that we've been able to think about client problems, think about, innovation, and being able then to bring a new way of thinking, even though we're not in the same room. So I think there's different ways that we can do this, whether it's a hybrid model, whether there's some people in the room, but the calling out of bullshit in offices isn't done enough. And I think that's the bit which is what John's highlighting, the dullness of that people just go on and, no one really says anything about it. So I think we can have, go on.
But a good leader doesn't let that shit happen. A good leader.
But here's the thing, Bill, you and I could probably facilitate that. John could facilitate that. Laurie could facilitate that. Not many people can do that.
Somebody in the chat says you can't mute them in real life.
The Zoom user.
Yeah, when you're 6'6", 230 pounds, yes, you can.
Well, not now, Bill.
Right, but I want to come back to something small and relate it back to why people don't think in the way the brain works.
Yep.
People can check out a lot easier when they're virtual. from each other. I mean, I just checked out for a few minutes to say to my maintenance guy, could you get the construction to stop for like 15 minutes? Right. So I mean, but if I'm physically with someone and I'm next to them around an easel like Bill has, I can't check out. I just can't check out. And you can look me in the eye. And we can have these really deep emotional conversations. Again, I want to bring it back to the way the brain works to keep me engaged, and I can tell stories, and someone can hear. There's something about the physicality of it that I think we're missing. And
the maintenance man isn't working for you.
Right now, it's not working for me. I'll mute myself again.
No, you're okay. You're okay. We don't want you to.
You're fine. You're fine. We can barely hear it. You can barely hear it.
I thought it was John making noises just to disrupt us.
I'm gonna throw in one final question because we're coming to the end of this, and it's a question by Lisa, who's here today. So it's a kind of left field question that I've been looking at for the last 5 minutes. So why can't we use data and analytics to come up with a fairer compensation structure for salaries across the board? Here's the example, like, why are NFL quarterbacks, and just thinking about the Super Bowl that's happening this weekend, why are NFL quarterbacks making millions and zillions in salaries and bonuses, and our teachers, mainly who similarly serve as role models and inspire us to greatness, if not in more lasting and personal terms, be so darn inequitable? Who is continuing to make these rules, and what can we do to break them down? And that's from Lisa.
Well, this is not a data and analytics question. This is a sociology question.
And a political one.
Yeah, Dean Kamen's been running around for years saying, why do we pay people millions of dollars to throw balls and bounce them, and we ignore scientists, every day? So, this is just a matter of question of economics and sociology, not data and analytics.
Yes.
I mean, we could gather up all the salary data in the world and publish it and do analytics, and it still wouldn't change.
And still wouldn't have the same intention. Yeah. It was an interesting one for me, but I was just equating it back to the whole Super Bowl happening this week as well. So this weekend,
I thought you were going to ask what. Go ahead, Lori.
Go on, Lori.
I think that it also has to do with the culture of an organization. If you take it into an organization on what people value, why do CEOs make 500 times more than the person who's at the lowest rung in their organization? It's the same thing. It's what do we value, and what do people put money on, and why is someone's decisions at that level more important than the decision that someone else is making at the frontline level, which could impact consumers directly?
Yeah, and the other question is, why doesn't every major city in America have a life-size statue of Bill Schmarzo? Why not? I mean, come on.
Because they don't have the resources to build one big enough. It's it's just too big. I mean, what can you do? So I don't even.
I have one in my backyard.
Oh goodness! That you what do you do? Do you sort of pray in front of it
every day?
Well, on that, I think Robert's just said, "Can you get one?" Go on, Laurie. You've put your hand up.
Yeah, get it now because go ahead, Laurie.
How big is your backyard, John?
Can we get to a question? Valerie Logan asked it way back, and she said, what are like the 3 takeaways that each of us will pull back from this conversation, or what would we recommend to people? She wanted to get to action steps. Can we work with that for a little bit?
Sure. Well, we've got 6 minutes, so I think you start with your 3, John, Bill, and then we'll close out.
Can the guys start first? And I'm going to hope that the hammering.
Yes. Okay. Which one of you? John, go first.
I'll jump in. Sure. I really enjoyed, Lori's perspective. I've already said that once. My takeaway is that, there's a lot of sociological and cognitive work that goes into why data and analytics can be successful through storytelling. I think that's number 1. Number 2, this pretty much confirmed my thesis going into it. People don't like to think. We got a lot of reasons on why. And I really took away that there's a lot of very engaged and interesting people in the chat. Some really nice points were made, some great questions were asked, some divergent thinking came out. Really wonderful, probably the most engaging chat we've had of all the AMA conversation so far.
The deepest chat. Yeah, the deepest chat, I think. Yeah.
The only two I would add to that, John, I agree with that. I love the conversation on the power of intuition and how we don't really respect that and take advantage of. I mean, intuition to a certain extent could be called tribal knowledge, but it's really critical. So to me, intuition is important. And I keep coming back to this point, and John, you hit it well when you said about the chat. Innovation comes from conflict. We shouldn't run from conflict. We should embrace conflict as an opportunity to learn. Whether you have to do that in person like me, I'm much better in person resolving those kind of problems. Some folks have figured out how to do it much more effectively through Zoom and such. But to me, it's the conflict is where we're going to basically, drive that reinvention process.
Okay, great. Conflict. And Lori.
I think the piece, and sorry.
Just as he starts to bang.
There's going to be a lot of conversation about this. I think the piece for me, and John, I actually want to give you a challenge. These visualizations that we have all have people behind them. I want us to tell the story of the people behind the visualizations, not the people doing the visualizations, but the people that are represented by the visualizations. And I love that they're animated, but it's my friend Karen Dietz would say, it has to do with where you put the emphasis. Do you say syllable or syllable? And in our world, we want the story to come first, sprinkled with a little bit of data. Story first, a little bit of data. Let the brain rest, then story, then a little bit of data. And I think what's happening in the world that I see is it's data, and then maybe we think about a story. So it's just reversing it, because I'm not saying don't do it. It's just to think about where you use it for emphasis, but the story needs to come first to capture people's attention, to get them aligned, and to get them to eventually take action, because that's where John started with his example, was people aren't taking action.
Yep.
And so how do we move people to action? But the insight piece of this, too, that the data can hold that, and we can show that in a variety of different ways. Do we have access to this chat afterwards, Samir? Because
we do. But Bill wants to jump in.
I do have a question for Lori.
I think you've reignited something.
Hey, Lori, what book do you recommend for people like me? Is there a book that you think?
I don't know if we can recommend anything for you, Bill, for people like you.
Can you even read?
Bill? You want me to show one of mine? I mean, it's about the story.
Yeah, show me which one you like.
This is mine. I would
put it up, Lori. Put it up for
hold it up.
See. Come on, hold it up.
Hold it up higher.
Now, what I want to say to you is chapter 8 in this book, which is called "What to Do with Data," which was written in 2013. Ignore it, because the stuff I'm talking about.
I thought you said that in the chapter. Ignore it, Bill.
Ignore it. Go to my Level Up with Lori page on YouTube and watch the decision-making methodology and the brain research and the stuff that's there instead of it. But how to craft a story, this truly will be my seminal work. I mean, it truly would be. There isn't anything in how to craft a story that I would change in here. And after it's like 8 years to say that, I think is really something. But the brain research piece has changed a lot, and our approach to story, which is what I've been working on since the book came out. I mean, story with data.
Look, I wanted to thank all three of you. Thank you so much, Lori, for your time, your insights. They've been phenomenal. Thank you, John and Bill, as always, for giving us your interesting experiences and ideas from each of the different businesses you've worked in. So been fantastic. And thank you to everybody who's engaged today, from all of the comments to all of the conflict on the comments and chats, which we love. I think it has been absolutely amazing. And I'll echo Daryl, it's been an amazing dialogue. We've had, people saying it's been brilliant. A couple of people saying they want to be panelists. So I think, as per usual, we've gone deeper. We've taken data and analytics into a different sphere. So I am thankful for all the experience and knowledge I've gained today, which has been fantastic. So thank you to all of you, and we'll see you next time. You'll be hearing from us about the next particular session and what it's going to be about. Maybe it's going to be something closer to Bill's heart. So let's think about that. And
I think we talk about mascara or eyeliner.
I think you want to hear me sing. All the girls.
No. I think it's going to be you and I playing the trumpet, Bill. I think that's the only way we're going to do this.
Maybe paper mache.
Exactly. Paper mache. We build statues of Bill. On that note, see you later. Love to all. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.